So we're back. We want to finish off our application. We're going to do a few things. We're going to want to build a common footer that'll be shared by all the pages, and then we're going to want to add some other links. We're going to need to deal with logout and then add register login links and dynamically determine which links show up. So we've kind of started down that road already. So we're going to make one more file, make a new PHP page. I'm going to save this one as footer.php. Now you can probably imagine we're going to remove most of this HTML. We're not going to remove all of it. What are we going to keep?
11 and 13.
Yeah, let's keep those tags in our footer, and then we'll remove those tags from all the other pages. So we're going to get rid of all of that. And we'll put in a footer tag. And let's see what we'll use one of these bootstrap classes. What color should we make our footer? Green, blue, yellow, or red?
Green.
That just doesn't help me at all.
Red, green.
So I'm going to give it a class of alert-success, because that'll give it a background color, alert. So we'll make the footer green. And in here I'll put in copyright 2015 Tuesday class.
Isn't copy like and copy?
Yeah, actually it should be thank you, ampersand. Copy should escape it. The other thing maybe we'll add on here, why don't we add dynamically that our footer shows the current date? So we can use PHP. We can write a quick PHP function that will show the current date. Anybody know how we would do that? What function would give us the date?
And then pass in the arguments.
Yep, so it's recognized. Well, let's just try it like that. We can actually leave it blank. We'll see what we get as the default format. So that's going to be our footer. We want this appearing at the bottom of every page. So I'm going to go in to we'll start with athlete. Down here at the bottom, it's got these two tags that Expression Web doesn't like because the opening of the body and HTML are in a header. So I'm going to delete those. And inside my OB flush, before I call OB flush, we'll require our footer. And then call OB flush. So let's see how that page looks. So if I go to new athlete, okay, it's trying to load the date. We do need a parameter here, but our footer does show up, which is good. Okay, so what format can we put in here? Okay, let's provide that. Let's try that. We can try that format and see if that'll work. So I have to admit, I'm more of a month, day, year kind of guy.
I just have an alternative on the manual, if that doesn't work.
Yeah, that's not quite. It's actually duplicating it. Notice 0630, so it should be, think a single M.
Capital D for day, as in Monday, but then lowercase d for like the number.
Okay.
Capital capital M for month and capital Y for year.
Yeah, it's,
But you only use one.
I used 2. Sorry, so I said capital Y.
Yeah.
Do you want me to change anything else?
And month is capital M.
Capital M, okay. Okay, I think that's pretty good. So now let's include, now our list page doesn't have it, I only put it on athlete. So we should put that on all the visible pages. So athletes, login and register, they all need that. So on athletes, again, I'll take out my end tags. And I'm going to do the same thing on login. And on register. So we'll remove the end HTML and end body, and we'll require our footer on all of those pages. So I'll upload all of those, and now all those pages should all have the footer. So I can go to list, I can go to new, log in, or register. So we've got a footer, which is good. So now we want to add, so doing the footer is really pretty simple. There's not much, you know, so whatever static content, usually our footers generally are fairly static. We don't generally do a lot of coding or processing. Typically we have links, we might have social media. Fairly standard in our footer. Now, let's come back to the question of our header. We haven't built our logout page, which we should. Let's add a link in here to logout.php. So one more link, but again, we only want to show this link if the user's logged in. There's no point showing a logout link to an anonymous user. So I'll upload my header. What's going to happen if I click log out?
404.
Yeah, we should get 404. So we need to build this page. So one more PHP page. This is the last page we're going to build today. I'm going to save this as logout.php. Do we need any HTML on this page, or will this be invisible?
Invisible.
Yeah, right. We're just going to take the user here, log them out, and then what are we going to do? Send them back to login. So all of this stuff can go. We don't need any HTML. What are we going to need at the top and bottom?
No, oh yeah, OBs.
Yeah, because we're going to do a redirection, we'll need our our output buffering. So we'll need those. So what do we need to do to log somebody out?
Session destroy.
Okay, we will need to do that. We'll need to do a couple things first.
You would start the session first.
Right. Remember, before we can access the session, this is where PHP is really counterintuitive. We want to get rid of their session, but in order to get rid of it, first we have to call start. I'll show you what happens if we don't. So access the current session. The session start. Yep.
Depends whether you want to be safe and then onset your section.
Right. So what we actually want to do is remove any variables from the session. So the session has a method called unset. So we're storing their ID, we might be storing their role, we might be storing their first and last name. Any variables we've put in that collection, we want to remove them all from memory. And then Yash, you mentioned what we want to do next. What's the function?
Session destroy.
So if we call session destroy, that's a built. So these are all built-in PHP functions of the session object. We've used start. We haven't used the other two before. And I'll play around with the code in mind so you can see how each line is important. And then what's the last thing we do? I think we already mentioned it. Yeah, let's redirect. So take them back to the login page once we've removed everything from the session. So this logout page should really never change. We should be able to reuse this on every application. The only thing that will change is what URL are we using. It might be default.php. It might not always be called login.php. In fact, many cases we'll call it default instead. So this should be all the code that we need. We'll try it out. And then I'm going to play around with the code so we can see what each thing does. So I'm still logged in. Now if I hit log out, okay, the redirect worked. But the real question is, am I still logged in? Yes or no? If I try and go back to athletes, I am logged out. I can't go anywhere.
What happens if you destroy without unsetting?
Good question. Let's try it. Okay, so I'm going to log back in. First, I'm going to take out the session start. So I've commented out session start. So I'm logged in. I click log out. Okay, I got back. It looks like I'm logged out. However, actually, we can tell I'm not logged out. How can you tell?
We still got our,
The nav bar is still here, right? Those links are still here. Because what are we checking? It's checking whether my session variable called user ID is empty. So if we don't call session start, it doesn't actually log us out. So we need that. What happens if I don't call session unset? To be honest with you, I'm not sure what will happen. We'll try it. So I'm logged in. When I click log out, actually it did work, right? That value's gone if I try to go back. So this is not required, but it's an extra check, which is probably a good idea. Make sure we remove anything that we put into the session before we destroy it is probably a good idea. Okay, so I want both of those lines there. Okay, so now we get our links when we're logged in, which is great. Our logout works, but we also wanted to do, I think what Darcy or Chad mentioned in the, sorry, or Jesse mentioned in the header. What should we do in the header now?
register.
Yeah, so let's add in here, we've got our if statement here. So if our session user ID is empty, actually what we can do, we're going to move this out of our if statement because now we want that UL anyway. We want the unordered list. We're just going to have different links in that list. So I'm going to move this above my if statement all the way up here. And I'm going to move my ending tag down here. And now we'll add an else. I'll close my PHP tag there. Oops. So this is what, these are the links that go in our nav bar if the user's logged in. And here we've got two separate links. So our first link goes to register. I realize the tags are a bit messy because we're going in and out of PHP and HTML. If you wanted to write this whole thing and echo out those links with one set of PHP tags, you might find that code cleaner. You could do it that way. But I think this will give us the result that we want. We've got to be mindful of where our tags and brackets go.
Is using echo a good practice?
You know what? It doesn't really matter. It's really your preference. You could do either. So if I try this out when I'm logged in, I still get my nav bar. If I'm logged out, I get register and log in. So register, log in. Once I log in, those two links should go away, and I get my private links. So now we can move around, we log out, we get the public links again. So we've dual purposed, we've used this one header, but it will function differently depending on whether our user is authenticated or not authenticated.
Could you see your footer for one quick second?
Sure. So, I mean, we don't need this. You don't have to print out the current date on there. Normally in the sites we're looking at, they've got a whole bunch of content and links in the footer. I was just trying to think of something we should put in there, really. Later on, in a few weeks, we'll deal with APIs and we'll look at how we can connect, for example, and put in some social media links, and we'll add those into our footer, which would be a pretty typical thing we would have there. And I think we have time. Are there any questions about using the require or the include? This will take a little while for you to get used to, because now you're going to be building pages instead of building them top to bottom. You're going to start to think about pieces. Okay? What pieces do I need? What am I going to reuse that I'm going to put off in a separate file? John actually asked a good question on the break, which was, do we really need an auth file and a database file? You know, couldn't we just put those in a single file and include that file? Absolutely. My preference is I like to make separate files. For me, the database connectivity is separate functionality from the authentication. So I've broken those into two separate files, but by no means do you have to. If you want to put all of that in one file and just call it include.php or functions.php, for sure you can do it that way. So you can structure your application however it makes sense to you. So the way I've structured mine may not be exactly the format you want to use, no problem. Okay? Part of what you'll have to do in your second assignment is have a common header, common footer, but how you break up and use other include files, all of those things would be up to you to do as you see fit or as you think makes sense. Okay.
Wouldn't it be better to use include all the time, since it's not going to give you an error?
Well, that's also a matter of preference for me, so that's a good point. Right? Let me go here to my athletes page. So I've used require once, right? I could use include instead. However, is this file, is it is the functionality optional, or is it really required to get this page to work? Let's say I mistype it, right? Let's say I call it database.php, which is not the name of my file. My file's called DB, but I've called it database. Do you think this page should run if I mistype that file, or should it crash? Well, let's try it. So when I go to athletes, right, if I use include, here's what you get if you can't find that file that you're linking to. I would suggest using require. Again, it is largely preference, so if you wanted to use include instead of require, you certainly can, and I'm not going to penalize you for it. Okay, you do whatever you think makes the most sense. Typically, I'm going to use require. If I want that file, I want an error to get generated if that file's not found, not just a warning, and I want a trap for that error, which was what I thought we would have time for today, but we won't rush through it. So also we'll postpone your lab till next week, because the lab has to do with error handling. Okay, so no lab this week. There is one other quick thing I want to do before we get out of here, which came up, which was we still have on these links, this isn't really related to what we've been doing, but the issue is these links show the ID numbers, which may not be the best thing, because it means I could go here and then perhaps I could change that ID number somehow. So what could we do so that users aren't able to change those numbers? What could we do? We still need to use those numbers, but we don't want to make them easily modifiable. What could we do to it? It's not going to be exactly what we did with passwords, but it's going to be similar.
Could you put it in a cookie or session to avoid it being invisible?
Like, how are you going to know which link? Because as soon as you click, it's going to go.
Yeah, we're not going to be able to do that. It's not a bad thought. What else could we do with this so that the user doesn't see it just as a plain text? Yeah, so what we could do is encrypt it when we generate the links, and then on this page we could decrypt it. Okay. Now there are a bunch of PHP functions available. The best one is in a library called mcrypt. Unfortunately, I don't think that library is installed on the server, so I don't think we can use it.
Can you use base 64 encode?
Yeah, so let's do that instead. It's not as strong, but at least it's better. So what we want to do is change on our athletes page. Let's change these links so the ID numbers are at least encoded, and then we can decode them. So there is a function for this. So on our athletes page, here we're passing in the ID. This is line 30. Here's our edit link, and here's our delete link. So around here we can use the function John mentioned. There's a built-in function called base64 underscore encode. If I wrap my athlete ID as a parameter to base64 encode, rather than just getting the number in plain text, it will at least be partly obscured. It won't be as good as using SHA-512 for hashing, but it at least will show up as a series of jumbled characters. So let's try that and see what we get. So this is a built-in PHP function, just takes a string parameter. If we add that and upload it and try our links now, I mean, it's only 4 characters. But at least it's not a number the user can change, and that number won't make sense to them. So this isn't the very best way to do it, but it's better than what we had. So we can click here. The problem is now my page is blank. So if there's a base64 encode function, you can assume there's a base64 decode. So now we need to go to our athlete page. So I need to go to athlete, and at the top, we're checking whether we have an ID. So in here, if we have one, we're going to call base64 decode, which will do the reverse.
Should you use that in if as well?
Not really, because that's just checking if we have it. That just checks if there's a value, right? Because if there's no value, we're adding, so we're showing a blank page. If we have an athlete ID in the URL, then we'll decode it and look that record up. So this is not, you know, super strong protection or encryption, but it's better than nothing. So now if we go back and I click, so that's what the user gets. So if I type, you know, I get nothing, right? It's hard for the user to at least change it that way. So we should probably do the same thing. Our delete links, we still have the ID number showing as plain text. We should probably use base64 encode here and base64 decode on the delete. Probably a good idea. So I'm going to go back. And again, around athlete ID on my delete, let's base64 encode it. So we'll call the exact same function, and on my delete page, we'll call base64 decode on that value again before we do delete. So by no means is this the strongest version of encryption. So I'll re-upload both athletes and delete. And now my delete links are encrypted. Delete still runs, so we'll encode it on the link and decode it on the next page. Okay. We do use this in real-world applications, so something like this. Anybody in here could search. I have a test account. But notice on the link, notice the status bar at the bottom, right? We've encrypted that ID, my ID. So some user who shouldn't have access to my profile can't just change the ID number and get somebody else's account, right? If I go in here and try and change this, so this is a, you know, like a 40-character string, I think. If I try and change that, I'm not going to get anything. In fact, that'll generate an error. I will have just generated an email to my inbox saying there's an invalid base64 string. So I know somebody's tried to change one of these when it happens. So that's how it would get used in a real application. So our version is shorter, right? This is only generating a 4-character encrypted string. But again, better than nothing, at least for now. In a real application, you probably want to look at the library that's called mcrypt. But I don't think it's installed on the server. So they give you examples of how you would encrypt using mcrypt.
Can we manually install it?
On the server, no. You could ask them if they would install it. I don't know if DreamHost has it or not. Last time I checked, they didn't. But this is okay for our purposes. So we're moving in the right direction. We're close to having a full application. We've got create, read, update, and delete. We've made our code modular. We've got a common header and footer. We've got Bootstrap. We've got authentication with register, login, log out. So we've done quite a bit with this. Okay, I will put all the files up on Blackboard, and thankfully I now only have to take my password out of one file, fortunately, rather than in every file we did. So I'll upload all the files to Blackboard. So what we'll do next week is we'll deal with error handling. Okay, so what happens when errors occur and how do we handle them? How do we build a custom error page? How do we deal with 404 errors and other unexpected things? I'll give you your lab. Error handling lesson is not that long, so I may even just have you do the lab in class. I might just be able to give you time in class to do it and get it done. And then the next thing we'll want to do in week 10 is we'll want to make it so when we add an athlete, we can also upload a photo. When we view a record, we can see that photo displayed. And in our list, we can have a little thumbnail that the user can click and expand and see the full image right from here. So we'll deal with file uploads in a couple of weeks. Okay, I'll put all the files up on Blackboard. If you have questions, send me an email or come see me during office hours. Okay, and I will put the videos up on YouTube as soon as I can.